to Culture Clash Parenting, the podcast where Astrid and Marissa share their joys and challenges of raising kids in foreign lands. Join us for heartwarming tales, practical tips, and lots of laughter as we navigate language barriers, blend traditions, and celebrate the beautiful mess of parenting across cultures. Let's dive into this adventure together.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to episode 17. We wanted to talk a little bit today about what it's like to be a parent in a country that's not your home country, but have your own parents back in your home country. And then, as your own parents are getting older, you do want to go back and see them. You don't always drag the kids along, and how that's different. Marissa, you were just back in the city last week. So maybe tell us, how is this different from last summer when you took the whole family and spent a month up in upstate New York and then the city and all of that?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you and I have been talking about this topic on and off for, well, probably the whole time we've lived abroad, right? It's always you, you always have a foot in each country, right? And especially as, caregivers, we do care so much about our parents and want to be able to be there and take care of them. And I think often there is always this underlying level of layer of guilt, especially as they get older. It was definitely easier when, they were in their 60s than now being in their 70s. So this is the second time in 2 years that I've gone by myself. Last year, at this time too, in May, as we're recording this, a friend of mine, her father passed away. And so I went for the funeral and spent just under a week there. And then this time my mom was turning 75. My brother was graduating with his master's. And so there was going to be a lot of family events and I wanted to be there. So I went, also for a week. But yeah, usually the summertime we go as a family. So, so to answer your question, how is it different? It is so different because there's just it's so much easier so like on the positive sides, right? Like it's so much easier to have like focused conversations. And when the kids are there, there's always sort of, or my husband is there, there's always sort of like, should I be with them or should I be with my parents? Should I be doing stuff with my brother? Like like it's always that sort of being pulled in another direction. And especially I think for us, when you like as such a tight-knit family living here, because we don't have family living here, that then when we go, like we have our rituals and routines, the four of us that are in the space of my parents and their rituals and routines. Whereas like when it's just me, I know my parents' rituals and routines because they're not that different from when I was a kid, right? It's just easier to be like to adapt when it's just the one of you and when it's one of you who grew up with those personalities and those rituals in that environment. So that
Or
was
that
like,
food for breakfast or something, or the fact that breakfast is at a certain time and everybody's gathering at the table when in the US we're just we throw the kids some cereal in the morning and they're off to school or they get up at different times. And my parents' house is, you get up, breakfast is at a certain time, which these days is later and later. So now I have a little kid who's like, I'm hungry at 7 because she's also jet lagged. But my parents may not have breakfast, which is more like brunch, until 10 or 11. And
yeah,
then the kid isn't hungry. And then I feel like I have to apologize there or apologize here. Yeah, I get it.
yeah, you're like pulled in all those directions, right? And I think that's so, yeah, like that's just making me think about exactly the things that happened while we were there. It was just like my family's much more like you just eat when you're hungry in the morning, except like my mom does make coffee and I tend not to eat in the morning. Like I'm doing intermittent fasting. I've talked about that. That should be a whole nother episode as well. But like, so yeah, like my mom's, I take my vitamins with my coffee, and then my mom's like, "Do you want some yogurt?" I'm like, okay, fine." Like I'm on vacation, but it's just me, right? And like you're saying, like it's so much easier to adapt when you don't have to adapt to like two different cultures. When you're like, I can like be in my home culture with my kids, like our family culture, or I can be in this family culture. Um, so yeah, so that was the first thing, is like it does feel just easier to adapt. And then the other thing, and have these conversations, so yeah, my parents are aging. There were conversations we needed to have about like future planning. And those conversations are just easier to have in smaller groups. So not having the kids running around, being able to like schedule them. Like we had a meeting with, their estate planner. I like we had a family dinner, just the four of us, like my parents, my brother, and I. I don't know the last time, because my brother's married too, like the last time that the four of us were together, just the four of us without a partner or children. So that was like really nice. Um,
Hold on, let me pull out the calendar from
yeah.
1999.
Right. I mean, especially because Sean and I are about to celebrate our 23rd wedding anniversary. Like, it's been a while. Um, so yeah, so that was really nice. And then like the self-care piece, right? Like you and I, like to be able to just say to my parents, like, hey, I'm gonna go meet a friend for coffee. I'll be back in a couple hours, was so much easier than like having to arrange that with my my children and my husband. I need me time. Like the seven of you figure your stuff out, and I'm gonna get ready. Like I'll make this, especially where my parents live too, because they're not in the city anymore. So, like, you need to drive. So it makes it a lot harder to say, like, I want to go meet a friend. Not, and I don't have a lot of friends upstate. Um, but even like, because then it's like, oh, I want to go down to the city to see some friends. Or if I have some friends from high school who have houses up there. So if I do go meet up with them because they happen to be up for the weekend, it's like I need to borrow a car. So it's just a whole other level. When it's just me, it's like, I'm just gonna go do this thing. Or like I had to work, I had a call last week, and so I just asked my parents, like I was like, hey, can you drop me off? Like, and then go do your errands and come pick me up. That was a whole lot easier than, can you drop all four of us off, and maybe like three of us won't want to be like, again, different directions. So that's the challenge. That's really the challenge. And it was wonderful, and it was challenging. But I do think that even just, yeah, so I'm gonna stop there. There's like another thing that I was gonna say, which was like the travel itself, like being in the airport and being on the airplane and not having to take care of like make sure that like people are eating and that like they're okay, and like just getting to be on the airplane by yourself, be like, I get to choose what I want to watch, and like I don't have to like stop and answer people's questions. I can sleep now.
It's been a long time.
Yeah, yeah. That part was really nice.
Yeah, I'm still traveling with a toddler, so.
Yeah. Um, so yeah, that was really nice. Um,
Yeah, I feel also, and this may just be my parents, but I think in general, as they say, the older you get, the more you get so I feel like they are less less easygoing. And actually last year when my dad picked me up at the airport, he got in the car and he said to me, "Your parents aren't getting old; they are old. So take it slow." and and I think it's harder for them to arrive at the, "Hey, can I borrow the car real quick because I need to go pick something up," and they're like, but wait, you didn't give us an hour to think about this and plan
right.
for it. Like, but I'll be back in an hour. Yeah, but we needed this hour to be, and but they're not actually thinking that way. They're just stunned that I am trying to do something different from what they thought their day was going to look like,
Yeah.
when generally they don't actually really arrive at making the day look like that, which it's human. Like I often say, oh, why don't we tomorrow? It's Sunday. Why don't we go for a nice family hike? And at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, like, okay, why don't we just walk to the restaurant for dinner? Um,
Totally. Yeah. That's such, I mean, I think it goes to like a couple of things, right? Like, I think, like, were your parents like that when you were younger? Like, I know it's been a while since you've, like, but I mean, when you were a kid, were they, and a teenager, were they, um, how do I phrase this? Like, were they still like that? Because I feel like what I'm noticing is like, um, the rituals and the routines that my parents are in now, because it's just the two of them and they can make decisions for themselves, is not that different from how they tried to make decisions. Like they made decisions for us when we were little. Like when the weekends, they were the same way they are now, right? It's the weekend, I don't have to work. Like there's no routine, like get up whenever you want. Like my dad would go and mow the lawn at our weekend house if we were up there. Like on his tractor. We wouldn't see him for 8 hours, right? It was like everybody kind of made like, and my mom had to be responsible for like making sure that we like didn't stick our fingers or our faces where they didn't belong, right? That there wasn't, because there were snakes and all sorts of things. My mom was making sure that like she knew where we were. So I feel
safe
like
and
there's
fed, basically. That was my mom's job. Make sure that we were safe and fed.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's not different. Like my mom is still making sure my dad is safe and fed, right? Like that role is still there. It's just that she only has that one person to do, and then she can take care of herself when she's sure that that's in place. But it feels like you said, just like the slower part, because it's only one person and one person who's moving slower and making decisions slower. Um, it is like a whole lot less chaotic. It feels less chaotic than when I was a kid. Um, but I think it's because when I was a kid, yeah, like we just had my brother was running in one direction, I was running in one direction, like my dad was running a different direction. My mom was like still decompressing from her week of like work and all the things, right? Um, and so now there's just, yeah, it's like it feels like a calmer way of life, but also I like it feels like the patterns are the same. It's just happening slower. Like,
It feels calmer because I think they sleep later. Like my parents never slept when I was growing up. I wasn't taught any sleep hygiene, which is why I still my biorhythm is still off. But like,
why you're up when I text you at 3 o'clock in the morning and you're up or I'm up when you text me at 3 o'clock in my morning. Yeah.
well, part of that too is though the time difference and the working late. Um, but again, that's the mom thing. It's what my mother did. Like take care of us during the day to then, when we were in bed to then clean up the house, which we weren't taught to go to bed early. So she stayed up later and later. And I found that just last night, I was going to bathe the little one at 9:15. So she'd be in bed at 9. And then I said to James, well, why don't you get her dressed? I'll put new sheets on her bed. I come back from there. She's still sitting in her towel on her bed playing with him next to her. And I'm like, she's not dressed. Her teeth aren't brushed. And um, and he's
Yeah.
like, oh, you want my kid? It's 9:30 now. And sorry, I get messages coming in. And so anyway, then I was up much later because otherwise I still need my hour to decompress, no matter when they go to bed. So I think that's kind of what we did to our parents too. They stayed up later and later, and now that they're older, they can no longer. My dad used to live on 4 or 5 hours of sleep every night, and now he can no longer do that. So now he might get up at 7 and take some medication, and then he goes back to sleep to 9 or 10. But then now I'm bringing the little one over, and now I feel bad because now she's awake. I was tired because I still stayed up till 3, like I normally do. So anyway, the whole dynamic is I mess up their lives when I go there, and they're German, they're not shy to let me know, and they kind of mess up my routine with the little kid. So
Yeah.
I, it's it does give points of friction that don't necessarily need to be there, because I look forward to going there, because I hadn't seen them in a year, and they're my parents and I love them.
Yeah.
But then I get there and I'm like, why did I do this? Because we just fought again for no reason.
Yeah, I think the word that you just said, decompress, like that time to decompress, is such, like, it's not something that we were taught to do as part of our routine. Um, and I think when I was in college and I would go home, right? And so I was young and I would go out and, see friends and um
You said party. In your head, you said party.
I said party. When I would go out and also like when after college when I lived in New Jersey, and so I was a 45-minute ride away, so I could see them, but there was this level of like there was time to decompress away from each other because it wasn't 24/7. Um,
Right.
and maybe just because even when it was 24/7, like when I would go home for school holidays, there was still we still had that routine of we get to be like away from each other. Um, whereas now when you go, and so I see this with my brother, right? Like he lives there, but he doesn't see them regularly, but he sees them regularly enough that it's in like these small chunks of time. Um, and he has a relationship with them built on being able to see them for shorter periods of time more regularly. And so for us, when we go, to your point of decompress, it's like it feels like there's less time to decompress because there's also this desire or pressure of like we have to make this time count, we have to be together as much as possible because then we're not going to see each other for another year. And so there's always that underlying of like making the most of the time, but then there isn't that time to decompress. And so the first few days when I was there by myself, because it was just me, because I was jet lagged, because um I didn't feel like I had to make sure the kids were okay and then decompress from the kids and decompress from my parents. It was like, I'm just going to go up like at around 9 o'clock. I would just be like, I'm going upstairs. I'm tired. And, I would just kind of lay in bed. And by the end of the trip, I noticed that I was kind of doing what I do here, where I was just overstimulated, overwhelmed, like, and I would just sort of leave the room without saying anything. Like, I was just like, I'm going to go to the bathroom, and I'd go upstairs, and then I would like, oh, while I'm upstairs, I'm going to check my email, and I'm going to sit at this computer, and like 2 hours would go by. And it wasn't like actual like decompression, self-care in a good way, but it was like I just needed that distance and that time. And then I would hear my mom say, like, oh, maybe she fell asleep. She just went upstairs to my dad when he was like, where's Marissa? Like, because there was that expectation that I would be around and be there. And I hadn't communicated either. Like, I need time to myself. Because I wasn't even conscious of it till I got upstairs and was like, oh, it gets quiet up here. Um,
My parents need that too, or at least my dad does, because like he will at some point, even though everybody's in the room, he will still have his phone. He'll get some sort of notification, even if it's like the news ticker. And then he'll sit there and he'll actually start scrolling on his phone, kind of like what you were just saying you went upstairs for.
yeah.
And but he's a little hard of hearing, so it's much easier for him to then tune out everything else. And but then he might not engage. So then my mother's like, well, why aren't you answering? And
He's like, what? I wasn't paying attention.
to my mom. And it's like it is in any normal family, but because I've been away for so long, I think I can feel it more when I go home,
Yeah.
that it is kind of like how it's always been, and just the way, maybe it's a little dysfunctional, but who knows? But the
No, I
way
think that's really true. Like, remember when the kids were little, we used to talk about how when you go home and they haven't seen the kids for a year, like the toys that they bought the year before for the kids to play with, like the kids aren't into that anymore, right? Or the books that they have, the kids aren't into those books anymore, like because the kids are growing so rapidly. And then, and so it's like part of when the kids are young and they want to see the kids, there's this period of adaptation that's like getting to know each other again because the kids have changed. But I forget how much my parents changed. And I think that's what I'm noticing now when I go with the family, but also especially when I go by myself and there isn't the overwhelm of everybody. It's like, oh, right, like you're not the same as how you were a year ago. Um, I
Certainly not 5 or 10 years ago.
yeah, yeah, let alone 10 years ago, right? Like, maybe I can buy you the same chocolate. Like my mom loves Cote d'Or chocolate. So like that's like I always buy her chocolate, right? So it's like the gifts that I bring, chocolate and wine might be the same thing, but like the conversations that we're gonna have are different because um, because she's in a different stage of her life than she was 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 15 years ago when we moved here. Um, and so it does take, and then like you're saying, like they're slower, they have their rituals and they're more like habituated to their rituals. Whereas they could be more adaptive 10 years ago. And so there is that element too of like seeing the changes and being very conscious of it and then saying, oh, how do I adapt to them? Whereas I think 10, 15 years ago, I was like, oh, you have to adapt to the kids and to us being here, right? And I'm sure this is, I'm like for people who are listening who maybe don't live in a different country but live far away, like I think it was probably similar. Again, my kids were so little and we lived in Colorado, but similarly, like we saw my parents more often than we see them now, but it still was like few and far between and 24/7. But when they would come, the other difference is when they would come, they would stay at a hotel because we didn't have space in our house. Whereas now when they come or when I go there, it is 24/7 because they're staying in our space, we're staying in theirs. And I think that does put a lot of pressure as they get older and they're like, this is where the mail goes here and like the food gets put away in this order, right? Like, and those things that they don't want you to change. Like, it makes much more sense if you put the milk here and they're like, no. And I don't know where the milk is.
My parents have done that though for many years, where they got an Airbnb or a hotel when they were here. They also, for so many years now, they've kind of done this. We'll travel in the US for a week and we'll start kind of drive through and spend 3 or 4 days, and then we're on our way again. That's how it's been for I don't know, probably a decade or two. Which
I didn't know that. That's really interesting.
yeah,
They have a lot of people to visit when they're
in the US, yeah, they do
US.
have a lot of people to visit. They do. They used to be able to travel on buddy passes from a good friend of my mother's. So they had more money to spend than I do when I go over there, especially when I take the whole family for all the tickets. Like we try and my dad's very gracious of giving us his car when I take the whole family because he does have the 7-seater. And then we can fly into Germany. We can spend 2 days there, and then we can take the car and go to France for a week, and then drive back and spend another 2 days and leave again. So now we're a little more flexible in that, but for a while there, I just went with my kids and stayed there, and because I could, being more of a stay-at-home mom than or taught during the school year and then had the summer off, I could go for 4 or 6 weeks. But then it does become tight just because I am still the child under their roof. But now I'm bringing children along. So now I feel like they're thinking they're having to parent me and my children, which of course does not sit well with a 40-year-old, right? Like,
And they're not treating your children, they're not parenting your children the way they parented you because they know that they're not the parent. So you're like, wait a minute, what? Like,
wait
I
a
didn't get
second.
to have ice cream for dinner.
I do not get the entire bar of Kinder Schokolade. What? But my children do
Yeah.
for appetizers. It's insane.
Yeah. And I feel like that's the big takeaway, right? Like the big takeaway is that it's always hard to go home as an adult And when going home also involves jet lag and like packing suitcases for like and air travel and all of that's involved in there, like the suitcase packing and the unpacking and the um yeah, I mean, I think the jet lag was just a big thing. Trying to get over jet lag, and just as you do, it's time to go home. There, and then the aging, watching your parents age and realizing, you need to do more and show up more, or slow yourself down, like change yourself more. Those things really are big shifts that I think get harder in some ways it gets easier every year because the kids get older, right? So that element um, becomes a little like the traveling to get there feels a little bit easier as the kids get older. And I know, like, even though Cora's little, like she's still getting older and each year gets easier, but they're getting older, so they need more help doing things. And so it's also that transition and that shift of like, oh, my kids can be more independent, but I need to, show up in different ways in the relationship with my parents while still being the child, because I can't possibly know everything that they know, right?
With our teenagers, it's easier too, because if we go there and we take the children, they are now having been raised as these third culture kids. So it's not their first time over in Germany, or not their first time in the United States. In case of your kids, they speak the language. They can go figure it out, right? They can take a bicycle or even take the train. And at what Zach's about to return.
Not in Bumblefuck where my parents live, but yes. When we go down to the city, yes.
Oh, not in Bumble Bleep where my parents live.
Yeah. I mean, but yeah, yes. I know, like they can go out and know like they're going to be back at a certain time and communicate that.
Right. And if they happen to get lost, they can ask their way around. They do know things around there. Like they know where the hangout is, or where the store is, or the ice cream parlor that they really like, and they can figure it out. Like at almost 18 and at almost 14, or right at 14, it's easier, right? So that way you can focus more on your parents, because the kids will take care of themselves.
Yeah.
With a little one, like I said before, what do you mean I don't get all this chocolate? Like that's one of my issues going there for a long time, because I don't have any trouble saying, okay, well, you're the grandparents, do your grandparent thing. Like normal grandparents who live close would do. Okay, so you're taking the child this weekend, and you want to feed her gummy bears and chocolate and hamburgers and chicken nuggets. Okay, it's one meal, right? Two tops. Or a birthday party where you're just like, okay, eat cake, eat whatever is around here, because we'll make it up tomorrow in veggies and fruits. But now we're going on a week, and my kid is because she's on a sugar high. But that doesn't matter, because we're the grandparents. We have that right, which they're not specifically coming out saying that, but of course, talking in the background. I'm so sorry.
It's okay. I couldn't hear it until you mentioned it. You cut it out.
So that's definitely harder to allow them to be the grandparents that they probably secretly want to be, but they're not actually coming out and saying, no, it's my right to do that, as much as maybe they should, because then we could work from there. I don't know. It is, like you said, it's tough because they're getting older, and you want to afford them all the rights and privileges of being the grandparent and being older, and talking to them, having these meaningful conversations. But then at the same time, it just makes it so difficult, because you have no room to decompress from all that. Yeah. And especially if you're juggling the parents and the children at the same time, it's just tough.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's like what you just said about like being able to have those conversations. That was something that um so the last time when I went last year, I stayed with my aunt in the city because my friend whose father passed lived in the city. So it allowed me to be there to help her. And I was able to have these conversations with my aunt one on one, like I used to when I was a kid. And that I wouldn't be able that I don't have when the kids are there because there's just too much. Because they could be longer conversations. And that's what happened this time with my parents too. Like the important conversations were like they happened and they were able to go longer because there wasn't the interruption from even the 17-year-old and the 13 and the 14-year-old, right? Like who just walked by the room to get to get food, and then it's enough to like sort of distract the conversation and break it up. So I feel like the communication piece, it does. I mean, I'm definitely somebody who I can be in large groups and meet lots of people, but I also really want to get to know you one-on-one. And it's a lot harder to have those one-on-one conversations when the whole family is there than when it's just me and my parents. And even then, like I can be one-on-one with each of them at a given time. So um yeah, it's just adds another layer of the living abroad and or living on the other side of the ocean or the other side of the country or wherever you're living from your family, being on that seesaw between your parent when there's a third party, when there's the kids, the parents, and you. It's much easier when it's just you and the parents or you and the kids, to navigate that sometimes. So I'm still jet lagged, so this might make no sense whatsoever. Please let us know if this resonates with you as you're listening. And yeah, and what your experiences are traveling to see your parents alone or with your children. What you're noticing as your parents age and as your children age and the shifting dynamics of the relationships and the conversations you're having.
Maybe even how the cultural differences get more pronounced.
Yes.
Because
you didn't even talk about that on this episode.
yeah,
That's a whole nother episode. Astrid, add that to the list.
because I feel like my parents, who used to be these like global citizens and travel everywhere to India and try all the new foods and love all of that, and now they're very monotone almost in their diets, which again is totally normal as you age and your taste buds change and whatnot. But it's very different going to their house now, and they buy all these great meats and grill in the summer all the time, and there's so much food, and it's all meat and potatoes. It's like very much the stereotypical German thing these days, unless my sister-in-law from the Philippines comes over and she'll make some food. But other than that, it is still very similar to what I grew up with as a staple. But then there was more because they traveled more, because they were younger and could, and there was just a little more openness, I feel like, to I think that I don't mean this in a bad way, but I don't. Again, they have their rituals more so, and same with languages. They speak English fluently, both of them, and my mother used to be pretty fluent in French because we lived in Geneva when I was little, and now, because they're both hard of hearing, because they're both slower, and then I speak French with the little one, they will literally interrupting. I don't understand this. Like, oh, you're not even really trying. They just get so angry about it. When before, when my brother's kid was born in 2017, and again, my sister-in-law is Filipina, and they speak English to each other mostly. She speaks Tagalog with the boy, and my brother speaks German to him. So he grew up with three languages, And my parents speak not a lick of Tagalog. They speak a lot more or understand a lot more French than they ever could Tagalog. But somehow that was not a problem 5 years prior to when my child was born. It was or much less of a problem anyway. So, and they see them more often. So now I go there once a year and it's like, why are you speaking French to her? Can't you speak German?
You can speak German.
No, I'm telling them that
Yeah.
too.
It's funny because when you said that, I was thinking through the other lens of like, how have I become more French and that's impacting the relationship? But you're totally, but it's relationships are two ways. So I love hearing what you're sharing from that perspective too. Like, I would definitely, um, like one thing that I notice is I'm especially going back to America so much calmer than like I love being on the subway, right? Don't like I growing up in New York City, like love looking up at the skyscrapers and like I could just soak it all in. And I'm also like I noticed that when there were people like pushing and being like aggressive and like um just like the normal city hustle and bustle because they're running late and all that stuff. And it's not because I was on vacation because I had places to go at these times, but I was just like laisse tomber, right? Like I was just like I could be angry and like, but I'm just gonna pretend I'm drinking my glass of wine nice and slowly, right? And just like saunter down the road. Like it was so much easier for me to not um it was easier for me this time and last year as well when I was with my kids and when I was on my own to not get sucked into that hustle and bustle chaotic energy that happens in the city. And I think that is because I'm getting more and more Frenchified, um for better or worse. Definitely.
You're complaining a lot already.
But yeah, but it was
And
definitely, I was
then,
like, oh, even like one thing, like just as an example, like we went to the diner and I love the woman who works at the diner. Uh and she did her US marketing thing of like, oh, do you want this extra thing? Like French people would never like kind of try and upsell you. It's such a at a restaurant, it's just not as part of. I'm not saying they would never, but it's not as part of the culture. They're like, this is what's on the menu. This is what I heard you say. This is what you're getting, right? Like menu fixed kind of thing. And there
I,
it was like, oh, do you want an appetizer? Like, how about cheese curds? And I was like, oh, cheese curds. Like, I don't know the last time I had cheese curds, but I love cheese curds. So sure, bring them. And I had totally expected like Midwest cheese curds, like not the deep fried ones, but like the cold appetizer, like, and they were delicious, don't get me wrong. But I was like, there's so much fried food at this table that I was like, I need some vegetables. To your point of like the meat and potatoes, right? I was just like that to see how much fried food that people were eating and like consume. I was just like, where are the vegetables on this plate? And I know that's like, I would not have done that 10 years ago. I'd been like, oh, fried food. It's just like, oh, my stomach's not like, maybe I won't get the French fries now that I got the fried cheese curds with my sandwich. Get the side salad. Um,
and probably didn't get the European out of my system living in the United States for 20 plus years because I still don't eat fried food. But I never did like it in Germany either. Like I didn't like anything that was breaded. So like even the typical like your Wiener Schnitzel that everybody eats or everybody thinks all the Germans eat, not my thing. Has never been my thing.
that was
Um,
literally the first thing that popped into my head. When you said fried food, I was like, oh, Wiener Schnitzel.
oh yeah, I hated fish growing up. Hated it. I ate everything else that came out of the sea. When we went to France, I would just gorge myself on these shrimp and mussels and whatnot. Um, I even ate below a
I was gonna
lot.
say the blue, I'm the
Love them,
calamari.
love them, but no fish because I was used to the what my father called the stay-at-home mom type of fish, which my mother made usually on Fridays, especially during Lent. And it was orange roughy, and she breaded it, threw it in the pan, and flipped it a couple of times. And I just hated the breading. I realized later as an adult when I started cooking myself, which I didn't do until very late in life. Um, I didn't know how to cook until I was like 25 or something. But when I started cooking myself and actually made like just the fish, loved it. So that's there's definitely I never got into the fried stuff in the United States, um, and I will always seek out a vegetable of sorts,
You're really good with vegetables.
even if it's spinach ravioli, like it still has the word in it, right?
We've talked about this on other episodes, Astrid, and like it was so inspiring to watch you get your kids to eat vegetables when it was such a struggle for me. Um, and I think we said like you're like, as long as I put something they liked on top, they were gonna eat the vegetables. But yeah, yeah. So as we're wrapping this up, it's always something, as with the other topics we talk about on this podcast, I think, um, you know, the reason we started this podcast too was having your foot in both countries is hard enough. And then the extra when you're going home to see your parents. So it's not only foot in each country, but it's also that balance between being your parent's child and being your children's parent. Um, that also just creates all sorts of clashes.
Also guilt. I think it creates some guilt for going away because you do have friends who stay around for you, or we both have younger brothers who go and visit our parents much more regularly than we can. Even if we had all the money in the world, we still have responsibilities in the country that we moved to, which is also then again a different culture on top of that. So now we go from that other culture and go visit our parents, wanting to spend time with them, but still having that underlying guilt, which I think then also creates more points of friction, not just the hey, I think differently
Yeah.
from you because I've lived so far apart and I live in a completely different culture. So it opens my eyes to a couple more things than what you see when you come for a visit for your 2 weeks. And so that creates clashes, but then also there's this underlying guilt of, well, I should be here more often. And now, oh, we're not doing this. And also I want to show my kids this great castle that I always went to when I was little, and I never made it there. Like not once have I taken my kids to the Drachenfels in Bonn, Königswinter, whatever. There's this is one place that I went to a lot as a kid, and it's kind of cool. And I always wanted to take my children. Not one of my children has been there because just never make it because I have that guilt of being with my parents. It's just
Yeah. It's you're talking about the guilt and then the expectations, right? The shoulds. The like this is what we should be doing, this is what we expected to do. And I think like, you know, the part about if you had all the money in the world, you still couldn't go. The fact that we don't have all the money in the world, and then there are things we want to do here with our children that we can't do because we're saving, or we choose not to do because we're saving money to go there to have that, to create that connection too. So there's a little bit of guilt in that sense for me, um, as well, when I hear you speak of like, yeah, like the majority of our disposable income, our vacation money goes to our summer vacation, which means we can't do. And this year, we had one fewer trip to the States, so we were able to go to Greece. Um, but that's like more and more the conversation, especially as the kids get older. And it's like, oh, I really wanted to take the kids there before Owen graduated from high school. And it's like, oh, I guess we're not going to do that. Like, right. Because we still have to save the money to go to do this other thing, to go back to the States. And so, yeah, so there's all these different things that come up. But yeah, at the end of the day, it's about that guilt and those expectations and the shoulds and money limitations. And it creates a whole bunch of internal clashes with yourself and those external clashes with everybody else. So
and here's the
that's why we just want to nap all the time and eat chocolate.
So this episode wasn't necessarily about, well, it was still culture clash parenting, but it was actually our parents parenting us. It's
Culture clash childing.
clash childing, exactly. But yeah, there are definitely considerations to be made, and we'd love to know how you guys who do have a foot in each culture, in each country, whose parents are aging, who have little children, big children. Tell us how you deal with it. So if you have anything that we haven't touched upon and that you have a great solution for, please, please, please let us know. We're always open.
And as you're saying that, the other question I have is if you have passed this age and your kids are in college and so you can go, or university or out of the house, and so you can go on your own more often, I'm curious about how you create or facilitate the continued connection between your kids and your parents, because that's definitely something I'm starting to think about. Like, do I pay for Owen to fly back to the States when he's in university so he can see my parents and Sean's parents when he's not living with us? So, and I know these are conversations that come up too. So we love to hear how our stories are resonating with you, and we'd love to hear if you have stories that would resonate with us about what's to come.
Or how you get your third culture kids to go and see your parents, because one of my children has a great relationship with them and also loves going to Germany, and the other one couldn't care less about going to Germany. And he'll go see his grandparents, but only really if I say let's go, because that's not on the forefront of his mind, because here is where he's got mountain bikes and basketballs and everything that he doesn't have there and doesn't feel like he could be doing there. And to just go for a family vacation, he's 14 and he doesn't really care that much. He doesn't want to go on a family vacation with me to the beach. So not saying it's completely wrong of him to think like that first and foremost. Yeah. But at the same time, how do I get him to want to go?
How do you make it easier?
Exactly. Yeah. So if you have ideas, let us know. Please jump in. We're at cultureclashparenting@gmail.com. We're on Instagram. We're on YouTube. We're on Facebook. Find us. Tell us what you think. Give us any kind of feedback. We'd love to hear it.
See you next time, everyone.
Thanks for tuning in. Bye.
Bye.